The chains on my wrists were not made for a human body. They cut into my skin with every step, and the guards on either side of me were tall enough that I had to tilt my head back just to see their faces. I did not look at them. I kept my eyes forward on the great doors ahead of me, doors that were opening slowly, like the mouth of something enormous waking up. My name is Daniel Ashcroft, and 3 days ago I was the last living member of Earth's first diplomatic mission to leave this planet alive. The others were gone. I did not know if they were dead or simply erased from the records, the way this empire seemed to erase anything that did not bend to it. I only knew that I was the one being marched into a hall built to remind every living thing in the galaxy how small it was. The doors opened fully, and the sound that came out was silence. Not the silence of an empty room, but the silence of 10,000 throats holding their breath. Inside was a hall so large that the ceiling disappeared into a haze of golden light, and every single creature in it, hundreds of them of a dozen different species, was bent at the waist, heads down, eyes on the floor. Blue-skinned envoys with feathers instead of hair. Insected nobles with jeweled shells. Reptilian officers in gleaming battle armor, the same armor that had burned through Earth's orbital defenses in a single afternoon. All of them bowed, all of them silent. All of them refusing to look up, as if looking up might cost them something they could never get back. The guards pushed me forward down the center aisle, and my boots were the only sound in that entire hall. Step, step, step. A drumbeat leading me toward a throne I could not yet see clearly, hidden behind the haze of light and the smoke of something sweet and strange burning in tall braziers. I kept walking. I did not let my legs shake, even though every instinct in my body was screaming at me to stop, to turn around, to run back through those doors before they closed. I had seen what this empire's ships could do to a city in under a minute. I had seen the reports, the coordinates that stopped transmitting, the silence that followed. I knew exactly what kind of power was waiting for me at the end of that aisle. And still I kept walking. The guard stopped me 20 feet from the throne, and for the first time I saw her clearly. The Empress of the Threshving Dominion sat on a throne carved from a single piece of black stone, and she was not what I expected. I do not know what I expected. Something monstrous, maybe. Something with too many eyes or too many limbs, something built to inspire fear just by existing. Instead, she looked almost elegant, humanoid enough that if she had been standing in a crowd on Earth, people might have simply thought she was tall and strange-looking, not impossible. Her skin held a faint silver sheen, like moonlight caught under glass, and her eyes were a deep violet that seemed to hold more light than the room around her. She was watching me the way a person watches a storm approaching from a long way off, curious, unbothered, waiting to see what it would do. Beside the throne stood a thin, robed figure with a long staff, and it was this figure who spoke first, in a voice that echoed through some device hidden in his throat, translating his words into a language every species in that room could understand, including me. You stand before Empress Vaith Sari Anmareth, ruler of the Threshving Dominion, conqueror of 1100 worlds, first light of the outer stars. The herald's staff struck the floor once, and the sound rolled through the hall like distant thunder. You will kneel. You will lower your eyes. You will not look upon her radiance, for it is said that her gaze can read the truth from any soul, and no soul survives that reading unless it is offered in humility. I felt the guard on my left place a hand on my shoulder, pressing down, urging me toward the floor. I did not move. A murmur ran through the bowed crowd, a ripple of sound without anyone lifting their heads to make it. The herald's staff struck the floor again, harder this time. "Kneel," he said, and this time there was less patience in it. I looked past him, past the smoke and the gold light, and I found the Empress's violet eyes, and I held them. I did not kneel. The guard's grip tightened on my shoulder, and I heard the unmistakable sound of a weapon being readied somewhere behind me. A low electric hum that I had learned, in the last 3 days, meant something very bad was about to happen very fast. My heart was slamming against my ribs so hard I was sure the entire hall could hear it. But I did not look away from her. I thought about my mission commander, a woman named Grace Halloway, who had stood in front of a similar throne 2 days earlier and refused the same order. I did not see what happened to her. I only heard the sound afterward, and then the silence that followed it, and then my own name being called. I thought about my daughter, 6 years old, asleep on a planet that did not yet know whether it would exist as a free world by the end of this week. And I thought, if this is how it ends, I am not going to spend my last moments looking at the floor. "Explain yourself," the Empress said. Her voice was quieter than I expected, and it did not come through the Herald's translation device. It came directly, in words I understood without knowing how, as if the language itself had been placed inside my mind the moment she spoke. The whole hall seemed to lean toward her, waiting. I swallowed hard, and I made myself speak clearly, without letting my voice shake, even though my hands were shaking at my sides. "With respect," I said, "my species does not lower its eyes before anyone, not kings, not conquerors, not gods if such things exist. We look at what stands in front of us, whether it is a friend, an enemy, or something we do not yet understand. That is not an insult to you. It is simply who we are." The herald's staff came down hard against the stone floor, and his voice rose in outrage. "You dare address the Empress without permission. You dare remain standing before her light. This is blasphemy against 10,000 years of law." "Then it seems," I said, "your law has never met a human before." Somewhere behind me, one of the bowed nobles let out a short, sharp breath, almost a laugh, quickly swallowed. The herald spun toward the sound, furious, but could not find its source in the sea of lowered heads. The Empress raised one hand and the hall fell silent again, more silent than before, if that was even possible. She rose from her throne slowly and stepped down toward me, her long robes trailing across the stone like water. The guards around me tensed, weapons half raised, but she waved them back without even looking at them, and they obeyed instantly, the way people obey something they have feared their entire lives. She stopped only a few feet from me, close enough now that I could see the fine detail in her silver skin, patterns like frost across glass, and the violet of her eyes seemed to shift and deepen the longer I looked into them, like staring into a very old, very deep well. "Do you know," she said, "what happens to those who look upon me and do not bow?" "I have a guess," I said, given the guard behind me who seems very eager to use that weapon. A flicker crossed her face. It was not quite a smile, but it was close to one, the way frost sometimes catches light and looks, for just a moment, warm. "For 10,000 years," she said, "every species brought before this throne has done one of two things. They have knelt and lowered their eyes and accepted a place within my dominion, as servants, as subjects, as lesser lights beneath a greater one. Or they have refused out of pride, out of foolishness, and they have been removed from this hall, and from existence as an example to the next world that thinks itself equal to mine." "And which am I?" I asked, "proud or foolish?" "That," she said, "is what I intend to find out." She reached out one hand, silver fingers extending toward my face, and I forced myself not to flinch as she touched my jaw, tilting my head slightly, studying my eyes the way a scientist studies something under a lens. I could feel something pressing at the edges of my mind, not painful, but strange, like a hand searching through a drawer full of memories, looking for something specific. I did not look away. Whatever she was doing, whatever this reading of the soul truly was, I let her do it, and I kept my eyes locked on hers the entire time, because looking away now would undo the only thing I had left to offer, which was the simple, stubborn fact that I was not afraid enough to hide. After a long moment, she withdrew her hand and stepped back, and something in her expression had changed. It was not softer, exactly. It was more like the look of someone who had just found a door they did not know existed in a house they had lived in for a very long time. "There is no fear in you," she said, and it did not sound like a question. "There is plenty of fear in me," I said. "I am simply choosing not to let it decide what I do." "Explain the difference." I thought about how to answer that in a way that would make sense to someone who had never needed to ask the question, because everyone around her had always simply obeyed. I thought about my grandfather, a man who had told me stories about wars fought over the idea that no person should ever have to kneel to another person, simply because that person held more power. I thought about all the history my species carried, the long, difficult, bloody road from believing kings ruled by divine right to believing that every voice, no matter how small, deserved to be heard standing up. "Fear tells you what might happen," I said. "It does not get to tell you what you will do about it. My species learned that lesson a very long time ago, and we learned it the hard way through wars against our own kind, wars we fought because some of us decided that other humans should bow to them. We do not make that mistake anymore. Not to each other, not to anyone. And if I ordered your death right now for this defiance, then I would die standing up," I said, "looking you in the eyes, because that is the only way my species has ever known how to die with anything left to say about it." The hall was utterly still. Even the smoke from the braziers seemed to hang motionless in the golden light. I could feel the herald beside me practically vibrating with the need to speak, to demand my execution, to restore whatever order had just been broken by my continued existence. But he said nothing, because the Empress had not given him permission to. She studied me for what felt like a very long time. "Do you know," she said finally, "why my empire demands this ritual? Why every species that stands before this throne must lower their eyes?" "I assumed it was tradition," I said, "a show of submission." "It is a test," she said. "Every species that comes into contact with my dominion is brought here eventually to this hall, and given this same choice. Those who kneel are absorbed into my empire as subjects, given protection, given purpose, given a place among the 1100 worlds I have gathered beneath my banner. Their pride is exchanged for survival, and most species, when truly faced with the alternative, find that trade acceptable. And those who refuse are removed," she said. "Not out of cruelty, though I understand it may appear that way. It is a matter of necessity. A species that will not bow to power it cannot match is a species that will, eventually, attempt to destroy that power out of pride, out of a belief that dignity matters more than survival. History has taught me that such species cannot be trusted to remain subjects. They must either be conquered completely, until nothing remains of that pride, or they must be removed before that pride grows into rebellion. So every species you have ever met," I said slowly, "has either broken or been destroyed." "Until now," she said. The words hung in the air between us, and I realized, with a chill that had nothing to do with fear, that she was not simply describing history to me. She was telling me something had just happened in this hall that had never happened before, in 10,000 years of conquest, and she did not yet know what to do about it. "You did not kneel," she said, "and you did not break beneath my gaze. Every soul I have ever read has shown me one of two things in that moment, either the desperate hope of survival at any cost, or the hollow defiance of something that has already decided to die and simply wishes to do so with a story attached. In you, I found neither." "What did you find?" I asked. "Certainty," she said. "Not that you would survive this hall, not that you would die in it. Simply the certainty that whatever happened, you would remain exactly what you are. You did not bow because you calculated that defiance would save you. You did not refuse because you had already accepted death. You stood because standing is simply what your kind does, regardless of the outcome." I did not know what to say to that, so I said nothing, and let the silence hold between us. Behind me, the herald finally found his voice again, though it came out strained, careful, aware that he was speaking into a moment he did not fully understand. "Empress, precedent demands that defiance in this hall be met with removal. To allow this to stand unpunished would undo 10,000 years of law before every subject species watching. Precedent, the Empress said, without looking away from me, was built by species that had never encountered this one. She turned finally to face the hall, and her voice, when she spoke next, carried through the entire chamber, reaching every bowed head, every silent throat holding its breath. "Rise," she said. For a long moment, nothing happened. The order was so far outside anything that had ever been spoken in that hall that I do not think anyone quite believed they had heard it correctly. "Rise," she said again, and this time there was no mistaking the command in it. Slowly, hesitantly, the crowd began to lift their heads. Blue-skinned envoys straightened their backs. Insectoid nobles unfolded from their bows, jeweled shells catching the golden light. Reptilian officers rose to their full height, uncertainty flickering across faces built for war. All around the hall, 10,000 years of practiced submission cracked, just slightly, just enough to let something new into the room. "This being," the Empress said, gesturing toward me without taking her eyes off the crowd, "has done what no species has done before it in the history of this dominion. It has stood before me, unbroken, unafraid in the way that matters, and has not asked for mercy, nor offered surrender. I have looked into its soul as I have looked into 10,000 years of souls before it, and I have found something I did not expect to find." She paused, and the entire hall seemed to hold itself even more still, waiting. "I have found an equal." The word landed in that hall like a stone dropped into still water, and the ripples of it moved through every species present, through shocked expressions, through glances exchanged between neighbors who had never dared look sideways at each other during a royal audience before. "Humanity," the Empress said, turning back to me, "will not kneel before this throne because I will not ask it to, nor will it be conquered nor removed. It will be met instead as I have met no other species in 10,000 years of rule, as something standing beside my throne rather than beneath it." The herald began to protest. Something about law, about consequence, about the danger of setting such an example before subject species who might now believe defiance was a path to freedom rather than destruction. But the Empress silenced him with a single look, and he closed his mouth and lowered his eyes, though I noticed, even then, that his gaze did not quite reach the floor. I stood there, chains still on my wrists, in the center of a hall that had just witnessed something that would likely be spoken about across 1,000 worlds by the time the sun set on this one, and I did not fully understand, yet, what had just happened. I only understood that I had walked into that hall as a prisoner, and I was, somehow, still standing, still breathing, still looking directly into the eyes of the most powerful being I had ever encountered, and she was looking back, and something between us had shifted into a shape neither of us fully recognized yet. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now," the Empress said, "you will return to your world, and you will tell them what happened in this hall. You will tell them that the price for standing tall in a galaxy built on kneeling is not always destruction. Sometimes it is respect, offered by someone who has waited 10,000 years to find a species willing to earn it rather than beg for it." "And if I had knelt," I asked, "what would have happened then?" Her violet eyes held mine for a long moment, and something in them seemed almost sad, almost tired, in a way that made me wonder just how long she had truly been waiting for this exact moment, without knowing she was waiting for it. "Then you would have become another subject," she said, "among 1,100 worlds of subjects, and I would have never known what stood in front of me. The galaxy is full of species that bow Daniel Ashcroft. It has been empty of species that simply refuse to, for reasons that have nothing to do with pride and everything to do with what they believe about themselves." The guards removed my chains without being ordered to, as if some understanding had passed silently through the hall about what my status had just become. I rubbed my wrists, feeling the blood return to my hands, and I looked around at the hall full of faces no longer bowed, faces watching me with expressions I could not entirely read, somewhere between curiosity and something that might, eventually, become respect of their own. As I was led back down the long aisle toward the doors, I passed rows of creatures who, an hour earlier, had refused to lift their eyes from the floor for anyone, and now, one by one, as I passed them, they raised their heads and watched me go. Not out of any order given to them, not out of fear, simply because something in that hall had shown them a different way to stand, and they were curious, for the first time in longer than most of them could remember, what it might feel like to try it themselves. The great doors opened ahead of me, sunlight from some distant star spilling into the hall, and I walked toward it without looking back, though I could feel her eyes on me the entire way, watching, the way a storm watches the horizon after it has passed, wondering what it left behind. I did not bow, and for the first time in 10,000 years, standing in that hall full of ancient conquered worlds, neither did anyone else.